The Alliance for Charitable Reform is a project of the Philanthropy Roundtable that educates legislators and policymakers about the central role of private giving in American life and the importance of protecting philanthropic freedom.
I'm Marques Chavez, Communications Director for the Alliance for Charitable Reform. Today I'm joined by Arthur Brooks, President of the American Enterprise Institute. Mr. Brooks, thank you for taking the time to answer a few of my questions.
Delighted to be here, Marcus.
I'll start by asking you about the Philanthropic Freedom Project, which is an initiative that AEI started earlier this year. Can you give a brief description about what that is?
Sure. At AEI, we're a 75-year-old think tank dedicated to the propositions of freedom, opportunity, and enterprise, and there's nothing that encompasses those values better than the great American tradition of philanthropy. People sometimes take it for granted, but the truth of the matter is that when Americans give privately more than $300 billion a year, that's equal about to the GDP of any of the Scandinavian countries, which shows you how much we give. And that's much more. That's approximately 10 times more per capita, for example, than the average Italian or most other Western Europeans. This is a big part of our culture. It's a big part of what economic freedom means in this country. And so at AEI we recognized that we needed to take it really seriously and study it more systematically. Some people think that the traditional system of philanthropy in the United States is under some kind of attack, that it's not, at least not appreciated enough, or at worst that there are public policies that are undermining the American philanthropic system, and we need to understand that a little bit better so we can come up with policy solutions. That's been the impetus behind a Philanthropic Freedom Project here at AEI. This year we've instituted a program that will feature events. It will feature working groups with everybody from philanthropic celebrities to people that are major leaders in the sector. We'll be publishing reports and op-eds. We'll be undertaking a major media campaign, and we'll be talking with policymakers on Capitol Hill about the importance of the American system and how we can keep it strong and vital.
All right. Okay. Well, earlier this year, for an interim report on the Philanthropic Freedom Project, you mentioned two specific tax policies that either have gone into effect or have been bantered around. One was the tax increases that went into effect earlier this year.
Right.
The second was a proposed cap on the charitable deduction. Do we have any data, or can you speak to what effect the tax increases earlier this year have had on charitable giving or will have on charitable giving?
Yeah, we have done preliminary work on that, and it's quite interesting. A lot of Americans think intuitively that if you increase the top tax rates, especially for those who are giving the most to philanthropy in this country, that is to say the wealthy, that you're going to lower their philanthropic giving, but actually the opposite is the case. As long as there are tax-deductible contributions, when you change the tax price, which is to say, if you increase the tax rate, you're lowering the tax price because of the deductibility of contributions. You're actually going to raise the tendency of people to give philanthropically, and early work shows that that is indeed the case. That the tax increases for the top rate. Most of the people watching us know that the top marginal tax rate at the federal level went from 35% to 39.6%. That decreased the price of giving. It has gone from approximately 65 cents that you have to pay for $1 in charitable giving to about 60 cents that you pay in charitable giving when you make a contribution that you deduct from your taxes. And that is in fact having a stimulative effect, paradoxically, for some Americans on how much people are giving. Now, that doesn't make it the right thing to do. Since we talk about philanthropic freedom, the freedom part is really important, as is the philanthropic part. Just because people are trying to avoid taxation by giving more doesn't mean that tax rates should be higher, and we very much believe at AEI that freedom amounts to people as much as we possibly can being able to control their own resources.
All right, so let's contrast that with the proposed cap on the charitable deduction of 28%. You wrote earlier that this has could have the effect of reducing giving by 4.35% and lower individual giving by $9.4 billion. Could you go ahead and explain about that?
That's a different kind of policy. Now, instead of raising the income tax rate, which would lower the price of giving, when you make a deductions cap, you lower the deductibility. What you're effectively doing is you're raising the price of giving to charity. Now, right now, the average person who's in the top bracket, top income bracket, is paying 39.6%. And that means that the deductibility is 39.6%. If you put the cap down to 28%, people have a lot lower incentive to give, or to give as much. And you can actually calculate the likely impacts on philanthropic giving in this country. The early estimates of this, based on the best possible data, I mean, these are data that were collected after the Great Recession, so they do reflect the kind of giving behaviors and patterns that we see in the United States today, and at a national level, a sample of about 8,000 families in their giving to calculate these estimates, you find that it's a little bit over $9 billion that policy would probably take right out of the philanthropic economy. I mean, $9 billion is a lot of money, and that would be $9 billion just the first year. Okay, so that would go on and on and on. This is a very, very significant effect. We have a tendency in Washington, D.C. to calculate everything in their 10-year terms, and so who knows what that is? Is it more than $90 billion? Probably so, because that effect really could grow over time. We also find that what kind of charity you're talking about is going to disproportionately affect how that sort of policy would touch an organization. We think that about 4.5% of charity would be crowded out as a result of that. But the more you work into the top income brackets, as you work into people who have tax rates more than 28%, if that's your donor base as a nonprofit, you're going to see that really being affected by this policy. So, for example, if you have the kind of nonprofit that disproportionately gets its donors from the top 1% of the income distribution, we're talking about hospitals, universities, symphony orchestras, environmental groups, that's true. Right. They get most of their income from people in the top 1%. You will see a decrease in charitable giving of somewhere in the order of 24%, which is a very, very significant hit. You will see as a result of that policy's insolvency in the nonprofit economy.
Wow. Well, since you brought up the Great Recession, what effects have we seen on giving as a result of the recession?
We did see it go down with income. So when income decreases, people will give less. However, the decreases as a percentage go down less in philanthropy than they do in income. So you see more muted effects in the nonprofit economy, and that's a good thing. It means it's a counter-cyclical kind of industry. It's not as if when incomes decrease by 5 or 6% that you'll see a 10% decrease in charitable giving. No, you see a lower decrease than that, and that's fairly good news. It also means that when you're in full expansion, which we have been over the past decade, and I hope we will be at some point in the future, that you won't see that kind of expansion in the nonprofit community as well. But it has gone down, and it is slowly coming back. We're still not to the point where we were in 2007. We think probably by 2014 or 2015 it will be where it was in 2007. All
right. Well, as you say, we're slowly coming back. You had wrote in an op-ed in the Chronicle of Philanthropy in January that many economists believe that even as the economy improves, that charities would still be hit harder if there is a cap on the charitable deduction put in place. Why is that so?
Well, even if the economy improves, or as the economy improves, people are going to be moving up into higher tax brackets. When they move up into higher tax brackets, the deduction cap is going to hit them, and you're going to have more and more people that are getting a disincentive from the tax system to give to charity. That's a big problem. So as the economy improves, you're going to see a more and more muted impact on the ability of the nonprofit sector to recover if you have some sort of a deductions cap, which are being contemplated. It's a pretty destructive policy from a nonprofit perspective.
Well, thank you very much for taking time to discuss these issues. Definitely a fascinating conversation.
Thanks.
If you would like to learn more, you can visit our website at acreform.com. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Alliance for Charitable Reform, and we're also on Twitter. Our handle is @ACReform.